Hi everyone, it's Deb from Project Life, Deb's Way. I'm just going to do another layout. Now the paper company I'm using is Craft and it's called the Greenhouse. I love this collection because of all the greens, but there was a lot of plain sort of papers, so I've decided to use a few extra things this time. I've just found a fantastic background stamp. Anything will do. I decided to use Distress Ink Ranger, the pale paint, which is a lovely green, which will go with the greens of this set. And I have my normal kit of some glue, double-sided tape, scissors and other bits and bobs. But I have added, I've been very lucky that I actually have a die set of some hanging baskets and some greeny grass, which I have used. But if you don't have anything like that, in the sticker book, which as you well know I absolutely love because they're good value, you have these ones here which you can use instead of my die cuts like I have. Also I have used quite a few of the collectibles that you get from Craft. So there's a few here of some of the collectibles I have used on my kit. But if you haven't got any collectibles, you will find once again in this sticker book you have plenty of stickers that you can physically use instead. So the first thing I do is I decide on the background cards that I want. The base cards which I normally use is the 6x4 or the 3x4 inch squares. And I have decided to use some white card. I just happen to have some A4 hanging around, so I'm going to use those, or you can use your 12x12 basil white cardstock. So what I'm going to do, which is normally my system, I cut my base cards from the papers I'm using, and as you can tell, these papers here they are really quite nice. And then also Craft, if you buy the paper pack, comes with a sticker sheet. I only used a few triangles from this sheet, which of course you could cut from one of these sheets manually, so you didn't need the sticker sheet. I also bought this, this doesn't come in the paper pack, but you can actually buy these quite cheaply, the single sheets. They always have a couple of specialty sheets with Craft, and I quite like this because there's a lot of words that you can cut out and other things that you can cut out from the sheet. And of course then you also have all your succulents and things you can use with this. So my normal system is I don't cut all 6x4 whites. I actually sometimes use some of the plain sheets to actually do my 6x4s, and then I layer my cards. So I think what I will do is I normally do, if I do 2 on this on the left hand side, I'll always do 2 on the right hand side, so that your layout is quite pleasing to look at. So I'm going to cut some of my paper now, so I will do that off camera, and then I will lay them out for you so you can actually see which papers I've cut and how I've laid them out. And then of course if you want to do that, you can actually cut them yourself. And one other thing is, when you have got papers which have a definite diagonal pattern, just remember that when you're cutting, to always keep that pattern facing upwards or sideways, whichever way you want to cut. So if you cut your left hand page with the arrows facing this way, when you go to do your right hand page, you have to make sure that when you do like your landscape cards, that your portrait cards, the arrows actually face the same way. Otherwise your layout would look very peculiar. So that is just a little hint when you're cutting your papers. Also too, when you're cutting your papers, always remember to check. Most paper companies are slightly larger than your 12 by 12, and they always have a strip that runs down here where they quite often have lovely words and other things. See on the other sides. So there is always strips that you can actually use, so don't forget to cut those off before you start cutting your cards, because you are wasting like natural beauty. You've got a strip here that you can use, you've got wording, you've got a nice little arrow border which I have actually used, and it's the little things that count. So they're all extras that you can add, that if you waste these, you are wasting money, because you can actually physically use them. When cutting your papers, particularly for Projectlife, most times your squares are 6 by 4 or 3 by 4. You're better cutting your paper into 4-inch strips, because then when you're cutting, you're not wasting any paper. So that's what I normally do. I always cut my 4 by 6s into strips, and then I cut whatever I want, because then that actually leaves you a lot of paper and hardly any wastage of your papers. Now I've cut my basic cards down. I'm gonna, with this particular kit, I have done a lot of layering, and for example, this card here is the one that's going to be here. You can actually see I have got 1, 2, 3 layers. So I have a little system here, and as you can see, I have actually got an 1/8 of an inch border, 1/4 of an inch border, and a 3/8 border, which gives you this effect. Or sometimes you might actually not want, you want a thicker border. So this measuring is a very, very good system to just write down, stick it somewhere on your bench where you can see it, and then whenever you want a 1/4 of an inch border, you know exactly what cards to cut, so you don't have to keep measuring. So that's my little system that I always keep for all my cards. So these are the cards that I have cut. So I will actually make it card by card and cut my papers as we go, and then we will assemble the cards, and I'll show you where I got all my pieces and everything else from, and then at the end I will have a complete Projectlife. Okay, so my first card, I have used my layering system, which is 5 3/4 by 3 3/4, 5 1/2 by 3 1/2, 5 1/4 by 3 1/4, which when you layer them, you will see they actually layer absolutely perfectly on your card. I also, any small bits of paper and etc. I just tend to keep, because you never ever know when you want small strips, so I tend to push them to one side. So when I have a white base card, I don't ink my edges. Everything else I normally ink. It's just something I like to do. So all I quickly do is I go around with my little dauber and just quickly edge. Doesn't take a second. Tend to think it just finishes everything off. Now this Life is Beautiful I got from my sticker book. As I said, you could use anything you like. As you can see, I've attacked this one. Here it is here. So I have just mounted it just to give it a little something. Now I'm a bit naughty. You could cut this with your guillotine or cutter. I tend to just eyeball it and cut it with my scissors. So there is your little label. To make it pop, you could actually add a little bit of white card on top, which I think I might do for this one. So use your double-sided tape. You don't need a lot of tape because you keep these in your little envelopes. It just seems a waste to use tape, and tape is quite expensive. So once again, just pop it down. And cut it, and as you can see, that actually lays really nice doing it that way. So what we do now is we attach our cards. Once again, unfortunately I normally have my tape all ready to go for the speed of these videos, so I will just quickly tape these down. Layer your papers. I normally call these cards, well, I nickname them eye candy. Always normally it's like your title card. You can put your date and other things on the top here. So it just makes an eye-catching thing to first look at. So we'll put these base cards down. Like so. Now if you didn't have a die cut, which you probably haven't got, you would actually use one of these. I'll just pull it out for you. And the good thing about this, they don't have a lot of white edges around, which a lot of the other ones have, and you can actually use this and then get a small texture and just carry on your little hook and chains up to the top, and that would give you exactly the same effect. So very, very quickly with mine, I'm just going to give it a bit of a colour for my pot. Now these distress inks, because I use a lot of inks and things, these are the colours that I don't use an awful lot. So with these, what I have actually done is put my little spare little daubers at the back with a piece of sticky Velcro. Then for the colours I don't use an awful lot, I can change them over. As you can tell, I haven't used this colour for a while. Then when you have finished, you can just take your dauber off, stick it onto the back, and that way you've always got your dauber for the colour that you don't use very much, so you're not wasting. I know it costs you a little bit for your sponges and that, but I have found it is a very economical way of keeping all your daubers for the colours that you don't use very often, and I find it really does work wonderfully, because then the colours that you do use an awful lot, like I always use a lot of brown, you can actually then just stick your other dauber and just keep them in your inks. So it really will, see, this one has actually got your Velcro there, so it's a good investment. Okay, so now we have done that, I have done my little pot. I am going to quickly do my ivy. There we go. I'll just stick my pot down. Ivy in. There we have our pot. Now what I did with this is I used a bit of double-sided tape just to raise my pot that little bit. Onto my card, and I put a little dauber of glue underneath just to keep it attached. And I've just stuck to stop these catching when you put them in. This Tombow aqua glue is very good because it's actually non-sticky, so if it gets on your fingers you can just rub your fingers and your glue comes on, so you don't end up with glue everywhere. And it also has, I don't use it very often, but your big one as well, and it goes a long way, so it is quite a nice little investment. It doesn't actually dry out on your tip because when you put this on it actually seals it off. And you can use every last skerrick of this glue. I've found it very good glue. And there is our first card done and finished. So one Project Life card has been completed. Now on to card number 2. I have used this base here as my full card. So once again, just edge your cards once again, because this isn't a white one, I'm edging this. This one here was the second border card, which of course is 5 3/4 by 3 3/4. Now this card here, because of the way I'm going to do it, I want to actually take off another 1/2 inch. So this one was a 5 1/2 by 3 1/2, so I'm going to chop that down to 3 inches. Which gives me slightly off center. Now, whenever you're doing your photo mats for Project Life, for a person that isn't a Project Lifer, I always tend to do 3 by 4 mats because most people can get their photographs done 3 by 4. So I always have either white or black or whatever mats, and then when you get your 3 by 4 photograph, you can just chop off a smither and you've got a little tiny white area around your photograph, which of course then actually really makes your photographs pop. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick these down like so, and then we are going to make our card photo mat slightly off center. Now in your collectibles for this, these are where these came from, but if you don't have collectibles, you could also use your sticker book or whatever else you have and just take some of these off. And also in your sticker book at the back, they always have some tabs, so you could actually use these tabs. And I tend not fold mine over because you can't see the back, so I tend to cut mine off, which of course then gives you double of what you can use. So decide on what you're going to use, and we will stick this all down and then we have another card finished. Now when you're sticking some of your photo frames down, I don't run the tape exactly up to the edges, particularly if you're going to be feeding things underneath, because then you can actually push them underneath, whereas if you tape it right to the edge, there is no way that you can slide things underneath for decorating, so it does cause slight problems. So I tend to do my tape a little on the inside, once again because you're putting them in pocket pages, they're not going to be pulled apart too often. So when you come to putting things like this in, you can actually slide them underneath and get them nicely positioned like so underneath your cards. With this particular one, I like to once again just quickly go over your edges same with your leaves, because it just gets rid of that little bit of whiteness that sort of hangs around from these. So I've double-sided taped these so that if you have your photograph, you can actually clip it underneath. So your photograph will actually go underneath with no problems. This one I will just glue down. And there we have our second card done. Now on the next card, you will use a geometrical underneath. I'm using my little pattern again. If you're doing a floral, it is quite nice to have a little floral, whether it be with roses or whatever. It just sort of, it's nice to have a patterned paper. So once again, we're using that nice little 1/8 of an inch border. Because of this bigger card, I'm using a 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 photo mat, which goes right in the center, down the bottom. Now in your collectibles, you will have a different tab which has got favorite, or you can make your own tab. But once again, because I've only put tape down here, I can actually slide that underneath. And I think for the sake, to make it pop because it's not standing out, I'm going to ink the edges just to give it a bit of contrast. Now put that at the edge here. Now because I love chevrons, I always have done, I've just cut a piece of the card and I've actually drawn some chevrons. They're very, very easy to do. You can do them in cork, you can do them in anything you would like. Then all you have to do is just you could actually put some tape on the back of this before, just to make it easier for sticking. Once again, you're saving money because you're making your own stickers. Then just edge your stickers. Okay, so what we are going to do now is just glue your little chevrons down. Of course, if you'd put your sticky behind before you actually cut them, you could just tear off your tape. And always, if your card is down to the bottom, point inwards, but if your card is on the outside of your layer, make sure you always put your arrows facing inwards to draw the eye into, because what your eye does, as soon as it sees an arrow, it will follow the arrow to wherever it is pointing. So if you've got your arrows round the wrong way, you'll be sending your eye off the page, which is not what you want to do. Making your own little chevrons, you can make them in, you don't have to have particular colors, you can make them to whatever color you would like to go with your little outfit. You can, in actual fact, get a pen, and I really like these because if you draw with them, they actually have a rubber that you can actually erase. It's an erasable pen. They are absolutely fantastic because if you make a mistake, I tend to draw around my chevrons, which once again my pen is not doing as it should do. I know it's only a small thing, but it does. It's probably because I've got wet glue. Just make sure chevrons pop just that tiny little bit. So just outline them in your black pen. There we go, my pen's starting to work. There we are. So you can actually see, compared to this one actually comes out and gets you. So there we have our 4 major cards. Now I'm going to make all of my small 3x4s here that go in the center. So we now have our Projectlife coming into its own. Normally with these cards that come down the center, the 3x4s, I always like to have 2 photographs in these, sometimes 3, but definitely you need 1 as eye candy in there. 2 if you haven't got a lot of photographs. So it depends on how many photographs you have to go into your. So the ones with photographs, what I do tend to do is I get my 3x4. I will actually cut an 1/8 of an inch border off of this card so that when you lay it down, it has a small border around your card. It just adds a little bit of continuity into your project life compared to just having a photograph just stuck into your folder. So I will get everything ready for those 4 cards and I will be back.